All right. Well, welcome into our live React College Football Playoff Reaction Show. It's for the penultimate ranking. Travis,
I love penultimate.
joining me. I
Great
do
word.
too. We have that in common. And Tyler Shaw here at KBTX, breaking down Texas A&M's number 7 ranking. I will say we've been doing this every week. They've been steady at 3. This is the first one where there's a lot to digest here. Before these rankings came out, we both kind of hedged our bets a little. I thought that they would fall to 6. I mean, this is of course coming off their first loss of the season, 27-17 to their rivals Texas. You were thinking 5. Well, they went lower than both of us thought.
Yeah.
Kind of your initial thoughts of dropping all the way to 7.
Well, it's the worst case scenario for the Aggies. Because you wanted to be in. I mean, you want to be in the top 4 because then you get that first round bye into the quarterfinals. But if you can't be in the top 4, you want to be number 5. Really, in most years, and really this year, number 6 is not bad either because number 5 is going to face number 12, which is going to be the Group of 5 champion, which looks like it could be Tulane, North Texas, or maybe James Madison. And then number 6 is looking like it could potentially be the ACC champion Virginia if they win, or
unless Duke wins, and then you're looking at James Madison and Tulane
both of those
being in
seem
there.
like pretty easy pass into the quarterfinals. Well, now at 7, you're going to face number 10, and that's going to be a real deal top 7 at-large bid team. It's not going to be one of the easier cupcake type games to lead into that playoff. And I mean, I we'll get into this a little deeper. It just doesn't look like there's a whole lot of paths for A&M to move up from that position either. Heading out of conference championship.
No, not the way that it's stacked right now, but it does seem kind of like it's stacked against them. You said kind of possible case scenario, but as it stands right now, they are still hosting. Might be a little bit of a tougher road at this point. Let's listen to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee Chairman Hunter Yurachek. He kind of explained his reasoning, the committee's reasoning, of why Texas A&M fell from number 3 to number 7.
You know, Texas A&M, with that loss, they fell into that group of 5 really strong one-loss teams: Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. Georgia's got the nod at 3 just based on purely their strength of schedule and the wins they've had over ranked teams. Texas Tech, again, a really strong team. They've won 11 games by 20 or more points. They lead the country in margin of victory at 35. Oregon has continued to improve. Their strength of schedule has gotten so much better. They're in the top 5 in most of the metrics, both offensively and defensively. And then, of course, Ole Miss, a team that's in the conference with Texas A&M, both very closely matched. I think Ole Miss is a little bit better offensively, as looked on by the committee, as Texas A&M is. But Texas A&M is a really good team, as are all of those teams that are 11-1, where they wouldn't be ranked at 7.
Yeah, if I could have one follow up to I know the tiebreaker for A&M that got them into 4th place was because of the opponent's win-loss record in the SEC. What was the conversation around A&M's strength of schedule in the group compared to maybe some of those other teams?
We look at everyone's strength of schedule, and Texas A&M obviously got one of the best wins, a road win at Notre Dame earlier in the season, in the entire season. But the luck of the draw sometimes in your conference schedule, they haven't played many of the teams that teams like a Georgia and Alabama have played within the SEC.
That was Hunter Yurachek. Both of your questions, Travis, of basically explaining the reason of dropping Texas A&M. Let us know in the comments if you're watching live, kind of your thoughts on what Hunter Yurachek had to say. Your thoughts on Texas A&M being number 7. Are they being overlooked right now? Is that too harsh of a move, down 4 spots after a loss to your rival on the road? I know there's a lot of emotions, a lot of thoughts from Aggie fans right now, but what Hunter Yurachek was saying is that they basically pitted A&M up against the other 5 11-1 teams there, and explained why they fall basically at the bottom of all those 11-1.
Yeah, interesting that it seemed like from the way that he described things that it was more about the other teams and the accomplishments that they have than necessarily A&M, which I guess the opposite of that is I guess the opposite of that is that the A&M's resume, there's parts of A&M's body of work that aren't necessarily measuring up compared to some of the other ones, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. Real quick before we kind of start getting further into that, I mean, Tyler, what stands out to you about the changes this week?
So, well, Texas A&M was the first thing that caught our, the biggest thing that caught our attention. A question mark heading into this was, will Ole Miss get penalized for not having a coach? I mean, you go back to the Florida State year when they were undefeated and they missed the 4-team playoff at that point because they didn't have their starting quarterback. Well, that kind of happened. Not the same situation, but an interesting one where you don't have your head coach for a playoff run. Hunter Yurachek explained that they like the stability that this program has, and they really don't have any data suggesting that they will play any different without Lane Kiffin at the helm. All the same players are there and the coordinators and everybody else. Another one that was interesting was the flip-flop of Alabama and Notre Dame. This whole time, Alabama's been one spot below Notre Dame. They flipped them this week. Alabama coming off a win over a 5-7 Auburn team versus Notre Dame's win over Stanford. I don't think either one of those a blowout win, should I say, over Stanford. I don't think either one of those wins this week is any better than the other or justifies, wow, that's much more impressive. You might look at the whole body of work and think that Alabama might be more impressive, but that was kind of what stood out to me here is the flip-flopping of Alabama and Notre Dame. What it suggests to me is if Alabama wins, they're also probably going to jump Texas A&M if they beat Georgia this weekend.
Yeah, I think Alabama moves into a position where they are in striking distance to get maybe even as high as a top 4 if they're able to beat Georgia in the SEC title game. That was huge in them moving there. What it says to me too is, and Hunter Yurachek kind of said this when you talk about the Alabama Notre Dame debate. They said it's been as heated over the last 3 weeks as any of the debates since he's been on the committee. It was probably a one-person differentiator between the two over the last couple of weeks, and something about this week maybe flipped one person. And if you flip one person, that can flip 2 teams when you go into the voting process, how this works. It's kind of like when you think in the AP poll, the total number of points, that's how many voters are in between those 2 teams, and if it's close, it can flip within a week. So that probably says that the margin between those 2 teams in the committee's eyes were really, really close. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, let's take a look at the bracket.
Yeah.
We're getting questions on who A&M would host. Again, we're not going to know exactly who they're going to host until after next week, but this is what the projected bracket looks like right now. And hey, look at that. Notre Dame, Texas A&M. Where have we seen that before?
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a situation where A&M's biggest win, the win that carried the water for them through most of the season, could be another big win in the playoffs, or it could be the one that ends their season if that's it. Now, the more that I look at this, the more that Notre Dame matchup seems a little less likely. Because if you looking at the rankings, if Alabama wins, they probably hop over A&M, which probably knocks them down to maybe an 8 seed, and then you're looking at an 8-9 matchup. Or there's a chance that if Alabama loses, Notre Dame goes back ahead of them, and then you might be looking at an Alabama matchup there in the 7-10 spot right there. I don't see a path where A&M moves up. That is to say, Hunter Yurachek was asked if idle teams next weekend can move up or down, and he said yes. Let's take, for example, it's not a great example, but it's one I gave you. Oregon's only loss this season was to number 2 Indiana. Well, if Indiana goes out and beats Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Well, Oregon's resume just got a lot bit better.
Right.
So maybe there's a fact, maybe that pushes Oregon ahead of Texas Tech in the final rankings if there's a close battle between. So there is that situation, but none of these teams ahead have don't have a whole lot of ties with A&M's resume.
No, the only way, and I agree, I don't think there's a path for them to move up. The only realistic way is if Texas Tech takes an ugly loss in the Big 12 championship, which I don't think is going to happen, but let's say it happens. If Texas Tech slid below Texas A&M, but even with Texas Tech losing, I don't think they drop below them. The committee has already kind of made it clear what they think of Texas Tech, and the stats back that up. Just what they think of their resume, what they've been able to do.
So to answer the question, I think the likeliest options for A&M, if the other part about this is I don't really see a whole lot of paths where A&M gets out of the hosting of the top 5 through 8. I don't think they drop below 8 in any scenario because I don't think – I guess if both Georgia and Texas Tech lose, there could be the scenario where Alabama and BYU, but BYU's on the outside now. I bet you BYU would just move into a
probably
traveling
10
team,
or a 9. Yeah.
A 10 or a 9, not necessarily into the hosting mix. So I don't see them falling out of the hosting scenario. But the teams that probably would be the most likely for them to face would be Alabama, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, BYU.
BYU even, if they win.
Right. And then the wild card in this scenario could be the wild card could be Ole Miss. If for some, there still is going to be no data, like he said, that shows they're a different team without Lane Kiffin between this week and next week. But if for some reason they decide that resume changes, I guess there's a situation where Ole Miss could drop and A&M ends up facing them. But that's probably one of the more unlikely ones. And then I don't see Texas Tech dropping all the way past A&M if they lose. I don't see a Georgia dropping past A&M if they lose. So those are probably the likely scenarios. Do you see any in there that I'm missing?
No, I think those three are the most. Well, yeah, you got Alabama, Oklahoma, Notre Dame. If you're an A&M fan, again, I think you're going to host no matter what. But the most likely thing, what you want to root for is a Georgia win and the Texas Tech win, because that will cement. Basically, you're not dropping at all.
No,
because you have the conference champions are already ranked higher. Yeah, I guess not the worst case scenario, but yeah, that bad scenario where things get a little iffy is if the two conference champions are currently ranked lower than Tech. If Alabama wins and BYU win, Alabama I think for sure is going to be ahead of A&M. So A&M drops to at least an 8. Mm-hmm. And then the question is, what does the committee do with BYU? If for some reason they moved up BYU, I don't think they will. But yeah, A&M could drop to a 9. But I think A&M's kind of locked in at either a 7 or an 8. Mm-hmm. Who they face, Notre Dame. If Georgia and Tech win, they're probably facing either Notre Dame or Alabama.
Right.
Depending, I think Alabama's a lock. Kind of what the committee has said. I don't think there's a whole lot of room for teams outside right now to move in.
No.
They were asked directly about Texas because Texas is right now sitting at 13. You're going to have to be top 10 right now because just taking into account the conference champions, that takes out 2 of these top 12 teams because there's only going to be 7 at-large teams after the 5 conference champions. So you're looking at the ACC champ, well, if it's Virginia, and then you're looking at, either North Texas, Tulane, James Madison, one of those. I don't think Texas can move up because they're idle. What would that be, 3 spots?
Yeah.
The highest they could possibly move is, I would think
because
1.
the line right now is from 10 to 11, so you have to move into 10.
The only people that would drop are, Alabama and BYU. If those 2 teams lose, there's no way the Big Ten is just locked up there at 1 and 2, I think, or at least in the top 4.
It really looks like to me if that Big Ten game is close, the title game, they're probably going to stay in a combination of 1 and 2, even with a
Probably.
loss,
I
unless
could
Georgia
see-
just absolutely takes it to
Yeah,
Alabama.
Georgia looks. You brought up Oregon's resume. I wonder how the committee will look at, let's say, Indiana just blows Ohio State out of the water. And those are Ohio State's only loss is Indiana. Oregon's only loss is Indiana. They may look at those two, and it'll be interesting how they put Oregon up against Ohio State in the rankings too.
Let's look. You make a good point, and we have some graphics here. Let's look at some, because basically when you look at the rankings there, I'll pull them up here one more time. You have your 2 undefeateds, and then there's a block of 5 one-loss teams there. And really, it was that block of 5 one-loss teams that kind of all got compared to each other, according to Hunter Yurachek, filling that 3 through 7 spot. And so when you look at those teams, this is the portion where A&M comes out looking really good, because you have against top 25, Georgia is the leader. They're 4-1 against top 25. A&M is 3-1, the next best winning percentage against top 25. A&M's strength of schedule is 15, and their strengths of the resume is 3, and those two are according to ESPN. Georgia 25-5. Texas Tech strength of schedule 59, strength of resume 10. That's kind of the biggest knock against the Red Raiders. Oregon's 16-4. Ole Miss 40-7. The interesting thing looking at A&M and that strength of schedule, strength of resume, they've been number 1 all season, but it's a little confusing because you also have the fact that their opponent's winning percentage in the SEC conference play is what led them to finish 4th in the conference. They had, one might argue, an easier schedule in the SEC than a lot of these teams because they didn't face Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, or any of these other teams. But the calculations still have their strength of resume high. Here's where the differences get pretty stark, and that's when you look at some of the stats. So Georgia, this is total offense, total defense, scoring offense, scoring defense. Georgia's 40th, 13th, 35th, 12th. Good defense, suspect offense. Texas Tech probably has the best argument of any of these teams on here because their total offense is 4th, total defense is 6th, scoring offense is 3rd, scoring defense is 3rd. They've played 2 top 25 teams and blown them out of the water.
Yeah.
Most of their games, they've blown teams out of the water. They just have the wart that is losing to a now unranked Arizona State earlier. Oregon is up there with the 13th, 3rd, 9th, and their only loss is to number 2 Indiana this year. Ole Miss, 3rd in total offense, 34th in total defense, 11th in scoring offense, 25th in scoring defense. And then you look at A&M, 20th in total offense, 19th in total defense, 16th scoring offense, 41st in scoring defense. They've allowed a lot of points this year. Defense has been something that the committee has harped on and docked A&M for earlier in the season. And I think this comparison kind of shows that maybe A&M does deserve to be at the bottom of that block. The other thing is if Georgia loses, they might fall like an anvil too.
Yeah, I will be curious how they would take a Georgia loss because we already and maybe that's another thing. Alabama we say is going to probably jump A&M with a win. Does Georgia fall all the way below Texas A&M? And does that maybe does that keep A&M in that 7th spot? Mm-hmm. If Georgia, I don't think Georgia drops that many by losing to Alabama, but we just don't know what this. Again, for those watching, just feel free to throw in the comments kind of your thoughts on this. No, this is not the official rankings or the final rankings, I should say. It's the penultimate rankings. It's next week is Selection Sunday. That is when we are actually going to find out the official bracket. The bracket we've been showing now is just kind of the projected bracket with how teams are ranked. Throwing in that 11 and 12 spot are probably those conference champions from either the ACC or the Group of 5,
or maybe the Sun Belt. Who knows?
Yeah. Who knows? Who James Madison gets in there. But with it being only 1 week left and only conference champions championships games being played, this is a pretty good indicator of what it's going to look like next. Yes, there's going to be movement, but you're probably looking at either a 7-10 or an 8-9 matchup if you're A&M. Both of those would be at Kyle Field.
And again, both of those would be against a true at-large team, not one of the conference champions that are a lower-ranked team who got their way in because of the rules of the bracket.
Because of that, we've been talking up to this point that A&M's in a great position. Even with the loss to Texas, we were thinking, okay, they lose to Texas, probably not getting that first-round bye. But they're hosting, and look who they could probably be hosting, that 11-12, maybe a weaker opponent that gets the automatic qualifier. Well, that's just not the case anymore. It doesn't look like they're going to have that easy path.
In our conversations earlier today, just kind of musing about what could happen, I think we were pretty set on it looking like an A&M North Texas
that would be
matchup.
That
would be the 5-12 situation. But I don't see any way A&M moves back into that 5 or 6 spot unless there's some real weird rankings gymnastics that happens next Sunday.
I know we haven't looked at it too closely yet, but if you're A&M, would you rather have Notre Dame? Would you rather have Alabama? Would you rather have Oklahoma? I mean, if you're looking, those are kind of the three most likely right now. Throw in maybe a BYU if they win. I don't know. Who would you rather host if you're trying to make it to the quarterfinals?
Notre Dame is a much better team than when A&M faced them at the end of the year. Now,
agreed.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at they're a much better team than they faced earlier in the year. I think Alabama is a good all-around. Alabama kind of reminds me of the Texas team that A&M just played.
Yeah.
Like they're similar feel to that team. Oklahoma is an interesting one because they have one of the best defenses in the country.
Very good defense.
But their offense, the thing that people want to say is that offense doesn't deserve to be in the playoff. They've won enough games to deserve to be in the playoff, but it certainly is a weak offense. John Mateer just hasn't seemed to be himself since he got hurt early in the season. So I think of those three, if I had to pick one that I think A&M might have the best chance against, probably Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Is the one that I would think would be the least intimidating, especially at home. I don't know. I think Notre Dame might actually be the least favorable out of those three. What do you think?
Well, and to the point of I don't know how many people want a rematch because it's hard to beat a team twice. It really is. I mean, I'm curious with this Georgia-Alabama game how that goes. And we've seen so many repeat Georgia-Alabama games in the past where the other team beat the other, where we've seen one team win the SEC and they rematch in the national championship game, and the other team that lost in the conference championship game won the national championship, just because it is hard to beat a team twice. Now, what A&M is going for them is they already beat them on the road. Well, this will be at home, so maybe you have a little bit of an advantage there.
Here's the thing that when you think of A&M's defense, what is the one part of A&M's defense that gives you the most pause right now?
Well, we saw it in Austin last week, and it's their run defense. They've been gashed for some big chunk plays, and that just happened. It's happened last year, and it's happening again and creeping back in this year, where they're just giving up big rushing lanes and big chunk plays.
Yeah, and I don't even have Notre Dame's as a part of this this little stat pack I have brought up, but rushing offense is Notre Dame's calling card. Well, and they just didn't use those runners very well or very much against A&M early in the season in that game.
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of weird that Jeremiah Love wasn't as big of a factor in that game. He's could be a Heisman candidate. Yeah, that would be. I mean, obviously their defense is going to have to hone in on a guy like Jeremiah Love. I would suspect this game goes a lot differently in the fact that I don't think it's a shootout like it was the first game. If this happens at Kyle Field, I think it's going to be a lot of ground and pound. Notre Dame's going to try to eat up the clock as much as they can. Yeah, A&M would have to be very, very disciplined in their run defense to beat Notre Dame.
I think but as I kind of look at how things shake out, I do think Notre Dame might be one of the less likely options. I actually think Alabama or Oklahoma
more
might
likely.
be, because if A&M stands pat, that means Alabama probably lost to Georgia, and there's a good chance that Alabama drops all the way out or flips with
to 10,
to 10, and then it's A&M Alabama, or Alabama wins, they go up ahead of A&M drops to 7, and then you're looking at maybe an Oklahoma potential match there. I think Notre Dame, because I don't think everything around A&M stays the same no matter what the outcome is, especially of that SEC title game.
You're right. I guess the only weird thing is if Alabama. Yeah. I mean, the only, maybe if they somehow slid, Notre Dame is up to 9 and A&M drops to 8, with Alabama winning.
Mm-hmm.
Notre Dame kind of so maybe that would be a possibility.
And just to go back to the conversation we're having, though, Notre Dame's rushing offense ranks 18th in the country. That would put them at number 2 if you compared them to that group of 5 one-loss teams that we were comparing above. That would be the second worst option, with Oregon being the next the only rushing defense better of that 5-team pile up at 1 losses that they have. Got some good comments coming in here. Thanks for those who are watching on Facebook and commenting in here. Who would you think that A&M would be the better option for them?
I think Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I do. Just because of that offense. A&M's strength has been their offense. Now, they're going to have a tough time, especially the offense hasn't looked as strong in recent weeks and putting together 2 complete halves.
Mm-hmm.
You look at Texas, you look at South Carolina. Each of those games had 1 half that was kind of a dud. So I think that battle between that really strong Oklahoma offense and the strong Oklahoma defense and A&M's offense will be a good battle. But I just think that Oklahoma offense is so suspect, and A&M does have a very talented and good defense. I think that would be enough to get the job done.
There's one other piece that I wanted to mention too about what the second question I asked Hunter Yurachek in A&M's schedule, and that is the fact that things were trending towards this number 7 ranking that we probably weren't thinking about, and that goes back to the week after A&M beat Missouri, when they held pat at number 3. That was the same week that Indiana had the scare against Penn State, and there was a thought that maybe A&M moves up into that number 2 spot after a pretty convincing win against a ranked opponent
on the road.
And they did not value that. At least from what the chairman said, they did not value that Missouri win very highly because Missouri was on a third-string freshman quarterback. And, just as a couple years ago, they docked an undefeated Florida State because their starting quarterback was out and kept them out of the playoffs for that. You can dock teams, I guess, for not as convincing of wins against a team because a starting quarterback was out. And so I think that, in essence, kind of wipes out one of A&M's top 25 wins. And it showed that I don't think this committee necessarily has always at all valued A&M's schedule strength outside of that Notre Dame win.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame win has been kind of carrying them to this high ranking this whole time. And it'll be interesting because the real conversations are next week when they have to do the final rankings on Sunday, and that's going to lock everybody into their playoff positioning. They're going to reevaluate all these one-loss teams that were idle, and after the conference championship games, that A&M's resume is going to be brought up again. That the Missouri game that the committee didn't think was very impressive.
Right.
There's the Auburn win. There's the close one against South Carolina where it was a really bad half.
The other one they mentioned though at times was laying the wood to LSU at home and clearing out their stadium. Now, I think that's proven to be a not as good LSU team, even maybe from when those comments happened earlier. I want to answer Ashland's 2 questions here. So with the way that the committee ranks the teams, they kind of go in pairs of 3, talking about teams and sorting them, moving them, ranking them as the committee votes. And so even going back to the 14 playoff, they haven't necessarily been concerned about rematches just because they're more concerned about ranking the teams in the order that they think they're going to be ranked. And if that happens to present a rematch, so be it. That's kind of been their take on that. And the explanation they gave on Ole Miss not losing any spots because they lost their head coach is that and I know Tyler mentioned this a little bit earlier, is that they haven't had a data point to see if
it'll affect them
at all, because they don't have any more games. And honestly, they're not going to have any more games before the final selection. So that tells me that that's probably not going to be considered before the playoff bracket is set. If this would have happened a week or 2 ago, that might have given them a reason to. And it's probably the reason why Ole Miss went right to giving, I can't remember his name right now, but the coordinator.
Yeah, defensive coordinator, Pete Golding.
Pete Golding, the full permanent head coaching title, to not give them a reason to say, well, they have an interim coach now, and an interim coach is unstable. He's the head coach moving forward, and that probably, along with roster retention, was one of the reasons why they went ahead and just did that immediately, so that the committee didn't have that as a data point to talk about.
Yeah, they're looking at the stability and the continuity of this Ole Miss team right now because they do still have all the same players. Yeah, they don't have their head coach, but they have the coordinators there. And you're right, they already hired a head coach. So, we're going to see, whoever they play, if this Ole Miss team looks the same. Or not, but yeah, I guess they just couldn't justify it. I guess in their words, that there was no data point. So I guess the timing of it ended up working out great in their favor. Because had this happened a couple weeks ago and they played a couple games and maybe looked a little sluggish, I think the committee would dock them for it.
And one other point I want to bring up before we get out of here with something we haven't even talked about is. So the 2 likely scenarios is A&M is involved in the 7-10 or the 8-9 game. Look who you have to face as those matchups in the quarterfinal round.
Not a great quarterfinal.
You're going to probably either be Ohio State or Indiana in one of those options.
Because we said earlier, I think those 2 are locked in there. I think the winner of the Big Ten championship is for sure going to be number 1. And the way it is right now, I think the loser could, especially if it's a close game, is probably number 2. So I don't think there's a whole lot of movement there.
The only option is if Georgia wins the SEC title, there's the chance that A&M stays pat at 7, and Georgia could possibly move into the number 2 spot, and then it's A&M Georgia with the potential
in the quarterfinals.
In the quarterfinals, and if you just kind of look, I know it's hard to necessarily guess because there's tie-ins involved and things like that. But as it stacks right now, if this was the top 4 for the playoff, I know this is all projection. There's still one more. You're looking at Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. Indiana's probably in the Cotton because it's the closest. Georgia is probably going to the Sugar Bowl because there's an SEC, long-standing SEC tie-in there. And I don't have to look at the mileage between the Orange Bowl and the Sugar Bowl. The Orange Bowl is probably a little bit closer. But then Tech is the 4 seed. You're probably going to the Orange Bowl. There could be some variance there. So A&M drops.
Probably going to Cotton Bowl is what you're saying.
Well, if A&M stays at 7 and plays Indiana, you're probably going to the Cotton Bowl. If Georgia slips into that number 2 spot, well, really, Georgia, you're probably looking at Sugar. If A&M falls to the 8 seed, plays Oklahoma, Alabama, wins, you're probably playing Ohio State in the Rose Bowl. That
would be cool. As an experience. For fans, I'm sure that would be a great travel. A lot of Aggies would travel to that. Ashley did have one more question. Thanks for going in the comments. Why is the loss to Texas worse than the loss to Arizona State? It isn't. Texas is a much better loss. What the committee was looking at, they looked at all those one-loss teams, what they've been able to do. And we threw up the stats earlier is when you look at Texas Tech's schedule, they have a couple of ranked wins right now over Utah and BYU, who are kind of bubble playoff teams. But they haven't been particularly close. Texas Tech's one blemish is that loss to Arizona State. But outside of that game, they have looked dominant on both offense and defense. I mean, you're talking about 49-0 shutouts, 50-point wins, double-digit wins over ranked teams. That's what Texas Tech has done, and I think that's why the committee values them so much at number 4. It's kind of hard to argue that, what they've been able to do. Yes, they have that blemish. A&M's one blemish is much better, but you look at some of A&M's wins aren't as convincing, not nearly as much as Texas Tech.
What it seems like is the two most convincing things A&M had before the Texas game in the committee's eyes was the 0 at the end of their record and the win against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And once that 0 went away, really all, in the committee's eyes, it seems like, all that they had going for them was the fact that they had that win over Notre Dame. We've talked about the fact that their conference schedule, which they couldn't really do anything about,
right,
was the reason why they finished 4th in the SEC. The winning percentage of the teams that they played was like just over 22%, which was worse than the 3 other teams that were ahead of them: Georgia, Alabama, and Ole Miss. So it wasn't a great strength of conference resume, and even on top of that, some of the games that most considered were good, like the Missouri game, they didn't seem to value as much because in that game they played Missouri's third-string freshman quarterback making his first start, and so they didn't really get the credit for that, good or bad, right or wrong. That seems to be the tea leaves that we're reading from the committee and why A&M. So they were probably, I want to say, in the committees, this is committees, us projecting onto the committee, in their terms, they were probably elevated a little bit higher than they should have been because of that 0 in the loss column. And when that went away, it was all fair game.
Then they started looking at some of these metrics and their strength of record, and just really how they've looked in some of these games, and their stats, because really defensively, they were much lower than some of these other one-loss teams.
And to be fair, we started this whole thing off by saying I said I thought they'd probably be 5. You said they'd probably be 6. So I don't know if we follow fully in lockstep with what the committee is saying about the team, but there is some numbers in strength of schedule that go towards A&M as far as the whole schedule goes, but there is a whole lot of data sets and what's gone on the field that go against A&M, and it's a weird tango to try to compare offensive scoring, defensive scoring, total offense, total defense against different teams in different conferences that have different strengths, and that's the committee's charge.
Yeah, yes. Again, I'm not saying I agree with the committee, but that's just kind of their reasoning of dropping them all the way to 7. Basically, I mean, in their eyes, A&M was kind of doomed. They valued the undefeated, that 0, like you said. So all they need to do is keep winning. But with this schedule and the way they've played, they needed to keep winning. To be ranked highly, because had they had beaten Texas, they'd probably they'd still be at number 3. But yeah, that one loss, even though it's not necessarily a bad loss, just really knocks them. The fact that, okay, now they're not in an undefeated tier. They're not with Indiana and Ohio State right now. They're being compared to all these one-loss teams, and when they look at them head to head, they value some of those teams better.
Before we sign off here, let's do a little bit of housekeeping and announcements. First off, just completely off topic. Tomorrow's our Food for Families drive.
Big day at KBTX.
Yeah, I know you've been involved with more of them than I have around here. Fill the folks in on Food for Families and what we'll be doing around the time that there's early signing day tomorrow.
Yeah, so we'll be live in all the surrounding counties, and here in Brazos County, we'll be at the Brazos Center. But we're going to be in Grimes County and Washington County, Robertson County.
You'll be at the Brazos Center.
I will be.
Me, Aaron, and Daryl Bruffett will be in Navasota at the Grimes County Fair.
The fairgrounds, yeah. So people are encouraged to come. Come donate any food you have. They're really looking for protein-heavy foods, but anything you have helps. And they'll be donated to all the food banks there. Really, this one day, fills a lot of pantries.
And we know the food banks have been struggling this year.
Right, they've been struggling this year, so any little bit you can come out. Online donations are accepted as well, but we will be staffed at all of these drop-off locations in every surrounding county. It's a big day for giving.
Yeah. And then, of course, tomorrow we'll have all kinds of coverage from early signing day,
yep.
where it looks like A&M's class is pretty much all but wrapped up with 26 commits, most likely signing tomorrow. And then on Sunday, we will have some kind of reaction. We haven't nailed down the specifics yet, but we'll probably have some kind of live reaction after A&M figures out their playoff fate. So stay tuned for that.
Sunday's the real one. This was the penultimate rankings, final rankings Sunday, 11 a.m. I believe it's an earlier one after the conference championship
and they
games.
love to draw that thing out, so it'll be a little bit of time after 11 before we know the
I don't know when our reaction show will be. It'll be sometime Sunday early afternoon. When the dust settles and we see the whole bracket. It should be fun, and then awaiting either December 19th or 20th first playoff game.
Yep.
So
it should be in Kyle Field.
Yeah, a lot to look forward to. Hey, thanks for those who watched and commented and part of this conversation. And we'll continue this conversation next week for those final rankings. But for Travis Brown, I'm Tyler Shaw.